There's a lot of my testimony that I have never shared, and I just feel really grateful right now, going into the year 2026, and I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude at how much God has loved me through so many seasons. There's seasons of thinking that I knew it all, and just like ever since I was a little girl, he's always been in my life. And I just want you to know that you are seen and that you are loved and that you were created for a purpose. For the rest of my days, I will talk about what Jesus has done in my life, because I wouldn't be here without him. Whenever I was young, I remember having a relationship with God. This is my journal from 2008. And I'm so glad my mom kept it, because as I have healed now that I'm an adult, I've looked back through what was important in my life. In 2008, I wrote, God made me for a special reason. God made me for a special reason. Why he made me is because he loves me. He has a special job for me when I am little and big. That job is to take care and be helpful. The world lied to me so much. It lies to everyone. The enemy is so stupid. And he will come into your mind and distract you with so many different things that don't matter in life. I just wanted to be loved and accepted and valued. I think everyone wants to know that they have a place and a purpose in the world, and I just didn't feel that whenever I was younger. Maybe I can dress cool in school, or bake people a bunch of cookies, or make homemade ice cream. Maybe then they will like me. Maybe then I'll feel like I fit in and I belong somewhere. I never felt like I belonged anywhere. So I was just always doing the most. I was an overachiever in so many ways. And I just wanted my parents to think that I was doing a good job in things. I really, really valued their input in my life and their acceptance. And they had really high standards for me, and I feel like I met all of those standards all the way until I was 17 years old. Whenever I was 17, I was on Instagram, just posting a bunch of photography and stuff. I've always been a very creative person, and I just grew up in the age of social media where that was the thing, and you could post on Instagram, and I had this perfect aesthetic. I was posting everything was color coordinated, and my outfits and the cafes I went to, everything was intentional, because I just loved beauty. I just loved the essence of things and the detail of things and the poetry behind writing captions, and I just loved to express myself in a way that was beautiful and different and unique. And so I ended up becoming online friends with this photographer who also saw that I had an eye for beauty, and he validated me online. We got into this online relationship when I was 17, and to this day we still have never met. We never met in person during this, I would say, year-long online relationship. But we were supposed to meet so many times in person, and the relationship took a turn towards the worst. When you're in a virtual online relationship, it's not based on reality, and you will say and do and believe these things that are not based on having a human-to-human relationship and conversation. So I had never been in love with anyone. I had never experienced any of these emotions that I was feeling for the first time at 17 years old, and it caused so much conflict between me and my parents. It was horrible, because they would see me go in these emotional roller coasters of super high highs whenever the relationship was going well, and then he would not feel great about the relationship and ghost me for a couple days, and I would be so down bad. I was physically sick because of it. I wouldn't get sleep because we would just talk all night. So it was so much chaos, so much so, you know, my parents didn't know what to do, so they took away all my electronics for so many months. I had no sense of control in my life, and our fights became so tumultuous, so chaotic. Those fights that I got into with my parents, who I loved and adored so much and who I just wanted to make proud, we said things to each other that you know, you can't really unsay. And I said and did horrible things during that year, and that was my first kind of like experience with love. It was virtual, it wasn't even real, and it definitely opened the doors to a lot of sexual things and sexual perversion. So from the time I was 17 and onward, I was addicted to masturbation. I was taught that. He had shown me pornography virtually, and I actually always thought that the videos of people having sex was really scary, and I didn't like that, so I never continued to watch pornography. But what I did continue to do was habitually masturbate, and this is what I would do whenever I just needed a quick comfort. Some days it would be more often than others, but I just needed like that quick comfort. And I feel like the only like intimacy really that I could find was with myself when I was alone. So that relationship actually ended because I got a job at a boot store selling boots. I had other jobs before this in retail and other stuff like that, but this was my first like real job where I was working full time. That's what I mean by that. 40 hours a week. I was 17 years old whenever I got this. And the reason why my online relationship ended is because I met someone new. And so I got into a physical relationship, I would not say romantic relationship, with someone for the first time in my life. I was 17, almost 18, and this man was 27 years old. It started pretty quick. He only had a couple weeks left of working at this store, but I was so innocent. Like, I did not know anything other than what I had watched on the screen. So I knew a bit about that, but I had never really been flirted with in person. I didn't really know that. Backstory, I was homeschooled, so that may make things make a little bit more sense, because you're probably like, oh my gosh, this girl's almost 18 and she's never had any physical contact with someone. No, I was homeschooled. So yeah, I did not. I was just like, I would say I was sheltered, but I wasn't necessarily sheltered. I got to travel and have an awesome childhood and stuff, but I never got, there were never guys in the picture who were like, asking me out or anything like that. I was just not that's not where my brain was at the time when in my teens. So yeah, anyway, this guy who I met, yeah, it was my first like physical kind of like relationship, and this is where things get a little bit dark. I'm gonna be talking about some things, so if you are like triggered by just like any sexual topics, I would just maybe skip 5 minutes or so, starting now. All right, so I went to the sex store whenever I started hanging out with him, and I bought all of these devices, and I didn't know anything about this. The store scared me, it really did, but this was I don't know, I was just like learning about sex and stuff like that. I still had never had sex. But what we would do is he would take me into his car after work. We were not in a relationship or anything like that. And he would, from the very moment I ever was alone with him, he would touch me inappropriately. And it was never like a kiss, embrace, or anything like that. It was very transactional, and like, you're a young teen girl, I was 17 at the time, I'm this older guy, and I'm gonna take advantage of you, like in the front seat of my car, we're gonna get in the back seat of my car and I'm gonna show you certain things. And so it was violent in the fact that I did not know, I had never seen a male appendage before, and he was, you know, pressing my head down and making me do things that were really, really, really painful. And I was like really not kept safe in that relationship. I will spare the details of the rest of kind of that, but long story short, we would get hotel rooms anytime we would see each other, or like an Airbnb. I would typically pay for it. He would get some wine. You know, I was used as a sexual object, as a toy, and my body was forced to do things that would only be done in very graphic pornography. And so I would just like kind of hold my breath and hope for it to go away as soon as possible. There was no love. It was all secrecy and just, yeah, don't tell anyone type of thing, because it wasn't good at all. But yeah, that lasted 8 months. Whenever I would see him, I wouldn't see him very often. I would see him maybe once a month. He ended up going to the military basic training. And during this time, I actually moved from my house with my parents to college. So the first night I stayed in college by myself was the night before we went to a first day of class. And that night I had went to the hot tub in our apartment complex. And I went with my future roommate and a couple other people I had met in the building. And then my future roommate ended up inviting a guy to the hot tub. That guy ended up being my boyfriend for 2.5 years. The next day we hung out, watched a movie, and we were instantly in a relationship, like instantly in a relationship. And I'm not talking like a sexual relationship, like a I want to date you, I want to fall in love with you, I want to marry you type of thing, like from both ends. Though the relationship did not stay beautiful, it started really, really amazing, because it was just like the honeymoon phase. And this was my first time falling in love in a way where I was not being used as a sexual toy. I was respected, and he really loved and cared about me, and he really had a good heart. You know, he ended up doing some things. We ended up doing really, you know, not great things with each other. Got very emotionally abusive and toxic. Are you sensing a pattern? But yeah, I mean, it started great. The first 9 to 10 months of the relationship, honeymoon phase, we were naming our children. We were like, when's the wedding? We were so excited. We were in college. We were inseparable. He ended up moving in with me, even though he had his own place, and we were just completely inseparable. So I mentioned the first 10 months of that relationship being wonderful. About 10 months in, I figured out that he had a gambling addiction. And this was not just like a normal sports betting, gambling, online thing. This was a 12 hours of screen time a day gambling addiction, where people were like contacting me on social media, threatening his life to pay them back bets that he had like kept or something like that. The relationship was not great after this point. I caught him in so many lies with the finances, and he did end up taking a lot of money from me, like a lot. I went into college and I had saved up so much money from that boot job where I was making like so much money from the commission selling those boots. So I went into college with all of these savings, like set aside. And he ended up taking all of those savings, and I'm not just talking about like a couple $1,000s, like This was many thousands of dollars, and it accumulated over time, and we kept a tab on it because I was like, one day you're going to pay me back. And he did end up paying me back in full, but it was just so many lies and so toxic and so abusive, and we got into physical fights in this relationship. There was never any sexual abuse. That was the only form of abuse that I did not experience in this relationship, but he did end up so like ingraining my mind in manipulation. If you've ever been with someone with narcissistic and lying tendencies, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They will make you question reality. They will make you think that it's all your fault. They will tell you things like you're never going to be with someone who loves you like me. You're never going to have a life outside of me. And if you break up with me, I will kill you. I will not only kill you, but I will kill your entire family, all of their pets, the dogs, everything. So there was a lot of blackmail in the relationship towards the end. And I figured this out over time. We would have physical altercations. I had like on my camera roll so many pictures of just like bruises on my arms, on my hands of him. Like, you know, I would take his phone and find things, and then he would figure out, and then we would just like, you know, he would throw me somewhere. And I mean, there are many stories in this relationship. We lived together, and there were many instances where my life could have ended, and I also felt like I was driven to the point where I could have ended his life and my own, and vice versa. So there was so much violence, physical violence, that came through this relationship. It was my first like physically violent and emotionally abusive relationship, and oh my gosh. But I would hide it. I didn't tell anyone about the physical abuse. My parents started to notice like the emotional kind of abuse, certain ways that he would talk to me around them, certain things, you know, our neighbors would hear like the fights really, really bad. And, you know, the cops were almost like involved a few times, just because of how loud it was. And, just so many threats of me breaking up with him, and then him going absolutely crazy. And yeah, so that relationship finally came to a close. You know, I went away on a trip, and I knew that this relationship had to end. I ended up ending it over the phone. He was staying with my family. It was a lot of drama, and it was a lot of drama for months of getting him out of my life, because like I said, he had moved everything into my apartment, and it just took a long time to get him to leave. And like I said, we were together for 2.5 years. So this was a large chapter. This was my entire college experience. I went into college with a lot of my hours already done. So this was my whole like 4 years of college experience, was living with him, dealing with the abuse for the last 1.5 years, and then finding my way out. And by this time I had moved back with my parents. And then I was, you know, setting up an apartment for myself, the one that I live in right now. And this is where things go crazy. Absolutely crazy. Oh my gosh. I need to hopefully speed up on this part. But as you can see, there's just a lot of chaos leading up in my life. Like, I'm putting my identity in these people, in these relationships, in these men. And though I had only had a few, like, every single one went wrong. Every single one went wrong because I was putting my identity in the relationship. Because I just so deeply wanted to be loved. So it is the next day. I realized this was a lot to share in one setting. And last night was New Year's Eve. I had somewhere to go to celebrate the new year. But I want to get right back where I started. I also just want to say that the people who I mention in my testimony for this, you know, few years, I have nothing against those people. Honestly, I have truly forgiven them. I also know the part that I had to play in those abusive, toxic cycles. And my goal for this video is not to expose people. Not at all. It is to expose the evil schemes of the enemy. We do not fight against flesh and blood, you guys. So, you know, this may look like a toxic ex or, you know, your family member who abused you growing up, but what is operating in them is what we need to expose. These people are loved by God, and we need to forgive them. Forgiveness is for us, it's for healing us, and it's also just to glorify and honor God. And we need to realize and wake up to the fact that we are in a spiritual battle. So nothing against these people. I truly have given them to God, and I have forgave all of them. I pray on their behalf, because you don't know, you know, if you're the only person praying for someone, and there is healing in the name of Jesus. There is healing in his name. I just wanted to give that, you know, I wanted to give that grace for people. His grace is sufficient. His grace is enough, and it covers all. It covers all transgressions. We have all fallen short and sinned against God. We have all fallen short. I want to show you how I believe so many lies from culture, from the world, from everything that is pressed in on us, from all the distraction from the age of social media and internet that I grew up in, you know, with just comparison and my body image. I didn't even go into the things that I was struggling with my body image growing up. I stopped eating for a little bit of time because I had gotten online and seen these people on Pinterest, and I, you know, started to basically starve myself. I lost 20 pounds whenever I was 12. And, you know, I've always been kind of like hyper consumed with my body image since I saw those photos when I was younger, and just like what I was eating and all that stuff. Eating disorders is something that so many people struggle with, not just women, but a lot of men do as well. We were never meant to see all of this stuff online, and it is a way for the enemy to come in and do what he does best: steal, kill, and destroy our life here, our peace here, and everything about it. But let's go back to the place that we were in. Whenever I finished college, around that time, because I graduated early, I was moving back to the area that I live in now, and the city, I live near Austin, Texas. That's where I started to go out and party post breakup. And the very first night, I remember this night because it was just after July 4th, but it was July 6th, 2021. I had just turned 21, went to celebrate kind of like post-birthday / July 4th. That night was a pivotal night for me. I got very, very intoxicated. I ended up meeting these men at bars. I met so many different men. I ended up getting their phone numbers, having sexual encounters with multiple of them that night. So many like just disturbing things happened to me that night, July 6th, 2021. And that was a huge turning point in the severe sexualization and hypersexualization that I was under. I saw myself as a sexual object, and it didn't matter really what the person looked like. If they were a man, I wanted them to be interested in me for my body. And I would wear things like what I wore out that day was basically just like an invitation to come and you know, seduce me and have me come back to your place. So that night was crazy. Man, I was so blessed that I made it out of that situation alive. Many of these men were strangers, and by the grace of God, certain things didn't go far enough with multiple of the people, but it was in group settings and it was in scary places that I had never been to before, random Airbnbs that night. And that was the first night I ever did cocaine. First night. So, you know, I was in this random hotel room, and I don't want to get into the details of what happened in that hotel room, but I was alone. I was the only girl in the room, and I was severely intoxicated whenever someone brought out $100 bill. I had never seen drugs before like that. I always had a weed pen on me, and I had picked up smoking weed at the end of my college, whenever I was in that abusive relationship. And so that's all I knew about drugs, was just weed and drinking occasionally. I just started drinking and just barely started going out. So I had my weed, I had my drinking. That was all I knew about. It was all I was ever exposed to, because like I said, going back to the homeschool thing and the college relationship, that kept me kind of in a bubble. So this was me like experiencing the world. And when I tell you I was so naive, like obviously I knew the drugs were bad, but whenever I think about it, I was under such a spiritual like oppression where I couldn't fathom what I was doing was risking my life. All of these nights, and this continued for 1 whole year. And it was like that drug opened up a door where the next kind of like weekend I got invited to this yacht party. And it was just like yacht party after mansion party after this, after that. I was meeting all these people, and I started getting into this friend group of people, like these who's who party people who had these nice houses, and they would, just have every plethora of drug at these houses. And because I had like opened the door of starting to do those drugs, it was like they just found me. Any drug would just find me, because I was searching for it, not in a way of like asking people if they had drugs, but it was like I had opened up that door spiritually. So the next few months is the first time I tried Molly, ecstasy, LSD, mushrooms, you name it. I also did ketamine, and I have some really, really horror stories, near-death experiences whenever I would do ketamine. This was a very dark time in my life. When I tell you, I may even have some like PTSD symptoms from this time, because there's this eerie, like deeply spiritual feeling that I get even whenever I describe it right now. Like I would be somewhere starting at 10 p.m. and I would not leave to go home until 10 in the morning the following day. And the only way I got home is by doing more cocaine at the after party, more cocaine to stay awake and alive after mixing all those drinks and drugs and ketamine and all this stuff. And I don't know how I'm alive right now. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, but I mean, God is so good. And obviously people have gone through so much worse, and a lot of this was my own doing. I was just opening door after door. You name it, I would try it. You offered it to me? Sure. What's there to lose? I remember having this quote, having this motto whenever I visited this random person in Boston one weekend. And the quote was, "Why not?" That was my quote. It was my quote, so much so that I almost got a tattoo that said, "Why not?" Because that was the motto I was living in. I was like, you only live once, why not? And I remember, and my mom tells me to this day, she said, "Ellie, you called me and you said, 'Mom, this is the happiest I've ever been in my entire life.'" Those were the drugs. The chemicals in my brain were saying, "You're so happy, you're so euphoric." And I was chasing these highs. And if I didn't have, cocaine on me, and I would have my weed pen, and then I would take some Adderall. So I was constantly chasing these highs back here at home and having these sexual encounters that turned really, really like dangerous, because they were with strangers, and I never knew. I mean, I could have invited serial killers into my home, or gone to people's houses. I mean, there were just so many men and women, and it didn't matter, what you were, what you looked like, and I was dressing, a little bit more masculine. So I started, wearing beanies and just getting under this, like everything about my identity was so lost. I don't even know how to explain, like, my identity was so lost. I was a stoner, but I was also like a rave party person, and I was just thinking that there are so many different ways to know God. And during this period, I had fully pretty much lost all belief of God. Maybe he would come up in conversation like every few months or something, but I didn't care. my mind was elsewhere. I was getting to know these people, not for anything internal, not for our personality, but for, oh, you're cool, oh, you're hot, let's hang out. Just like on the dating apps, just very vapid, very empty. I remember my profiles would just be my body, like me just posing in bikinis and showing all of my body. And I was so thin because I would just smoke the vape. I had a vape on me at all times. So I would vape all the time. I would drink energy drinks. I would smoke weed to get an appetite. And whenever I would get an appetite, I would be eating Taco Bell at night. So the cocaine, the nicotine, and the caffeine, those kept me like not hungry. So I would smoke weed to just be able to eat food. And during this time, I wasn't in a relationship, probably like for the first 6 months of that chaos. And then 6 months in, I actually entered my first relationship during that period of time. And it was with someone who I like thought I fell in love with at the time. I was still craving that connection with someone. And so this person ended up being a drug dealer. And, anytime we were together, we would just do drugs, and we would do coke, and we would, smoke weed, and it was very dangerous. I mean, he had like weapons on him. He would be doing active drug deals while I was in the car. And, this person, it's no hate against this person. Like he doesn't know Christ. And, we don't. At that time, I didn't know Christ. I mean, I was doing things that just didn't make sense. And I remember I was so distant from my family during this time. They would ask to like hang out every few weekends, and I would be at his house. I never left his side. That's another just weird thing. I was just moved my stuff in, like at his place. I was like, love me, like I just want to be loved by you. He was a little bit avoidant, and I was like all these emotions. So I just, wanted to be, by his side. I just thought he was everything. And, he was older than me. Every single sexual relationship that I was in during the time I was 21, these men were significantly older than me. So I still had that deep hole of like wanting to please an older man, which is something that, oh my gosh, God healed me from so much, and we'll get to that. But I was still choosing these older men because I wanted to feel some sort of like validation from being able to be liked and accepted by an older man. Wow, I just wanted to be liked and accepted, and I wanted to belong. My gosh, so badly. If you're watching this and you've ever felt that way, I don't know, I just feel like the Holy Spirit is saying, you belong. You have a place in his heart. You have a place in his heart. So I was in that relationship, and just, you can probably fill in the gaps in the details. That was not a healthy relationship. There was more sort of abuse in that as well. And I still have, a positive place in my heart. I have forgiven these people, like I said, and I had a big part to play in engaging in these things. I went to ACL that year, and I remember it was the time that I was dating him. And ACL is this music festival, and I did all these drugs there. I ended up in the medic tent multiple times with drugs on me. I was showing them the drugs. I almost got arrested these times. I mean, I'm telling you, I should have been put in jail so many times. I came so close to being, I could have been arrested at all times. I had drugs on me, and I was constant, this is where I have some guilt, not shame. God has forgiven me, but I do have some guilt because, wow, it's also just the grace of God. I would drive home completely inebriated. I would be under the blackout drunk, driving home. I live over 40 minutes away from the city, and I would drive home to where I live right now and not know how I got home. But my car would be outside, and sometimes I would be on ketamine, the horse tranquilizer, and end up in my bed. Sometimes another person would be with me, sometimes two people, and sometimes I would be alone, And sometimes I would wake up in a stranger's bed. You know, there were just many times my brain just wasn't functioning correctly during this time. This is probably, oh man, I mean, I have a couple more stories from the following year that are very, very dark as well, but this may have been the darkest of spiritual just oppression and most loss that I've ever been in my entire life, because this is whenever my body was being so exploited. My body was so exploited. Yeah, I just want to talk about this because I want you to know that if you have ever had your body, like, you know, we live in a digital world. If you've ever had, you know, photos or videos taken of you doing degrading things to your body, sexual things, know that that is not who you are. And there is freedom and there is forgiveness in that. God forgives you. He sees your heart. And I can see my heart being so pure in all those times whenever all of that, you know, was done to me, when my body was being exploited, when I didn't know who I was, when I thought if I could perform well enough for a guy, maybe then he would care about me and then he would love me. But I didn't care about myself. I didn't respect myself. I want you to know that you have a hope in a future no matter what you have done. God is so merciful. God is so merciful. In June 2022, I decided to quit vaping. And I'm getting emotional because this was a spiritual thing that was happening in my life. I decided to quit vaping. You know, my life had gone to just complete craziness. One of those times I was laying under a tree during a severe drug withdrawal, and I cried out to God. I said, God, if you're there, and this is whenever I know I had lost all belief of him. I said, God, if you're there, would you save me? I still remember I was laying under the tree, I was looking up, and I said, I was wrestling with whether I believed in him or not, because he had turned his face away from me, and I no longer could feel him anymore. There is a reality where you feel God, and there is a reality where you don't. And I don't wish that reality on anyone. I was laying under there and I had lost my will to live a few times, but this time was really bad. I was withdrawing from Molly and cocaine and everything, and it was the day after. I had no sleep as well, and I just remember reaching out to God for the first time in a while. A few months passed, and that's whenever I decided to quit vaping. And this is when things got really hard in my life, because 6 days later from quitting vaping, one day after my birthday on June 30th, I was outside filming a TikTok video of like, quit vaping with me, right? We're 6 days in, and I remember just being out there in the sunshine. You can go watch my TikTok. This video is up there, and I was just filming myself, and I remember looking up and seeing my grandma and my grandpa drive by. And I had just started like getting healthier, right? Going on these daily walks, and I was starting to like try to change my life. I was still going out here and there, but it wasn't as intense, and I knew I had to like take a step back. And I remember seeing my grandma, and she had called me like 3 days before, and she was like, hey, she called me darling. So she would say, hey darling. She had such a beautiful southern accent, and she called me over to her house, and she wanted to give me $500 as a birthday gift. She had never given me money before. Like, that wasn't something she did.
She doesn't just give people money. And she was dealing with a little bit of, health issues with her heart, but she was still young, and so like we would talk a lot, and she gave me that money like 3 days before my birthday, and my birthday came around, we celebrated, and then the day after is when I was making that TikTok video outside, and I looked up and I saw her, and she asked like if I wanted a breakfast taco, and I said no. And then a couple hours later, I was sitting on my chair, and my mom called me, and she told me, I called her mom. She told me that my mom died suddenly in a medical, like just at a medical doctor's office appointment. It was like a little blood work, like something went wrong. It was totally unexpected. And that's the day that a lot of things changed for me. When my grandma passed, it was really, really hard for me because I am so close to her, and I love her so much. Just like my mom. We spent a lot of time together growing up. She's awesome. And I thank her so much. And though she passed earlier than I ever expected, I thank her for doing the selfless thing and knowing that her time was up and going peacefully. Because she was pivotal. Her prayers were pivotal in what happened in my life. I don't know if I would be alive today if she hadn't passed that suddenly. And I just thank her so much, like, for all of the prayers. At her celebration of life a couple days later, or a week later, this whole like period of time was a little bit of a blur for me. I was in deep grief. I had never lost someone before, and I would have a bath going, and I would be smoking weed, and I was like, I finally know what it's like to numb out your feelings and just be so numb, but just like in grief and not really know what's real and what's not, because you're in a sense of denial. Like your body can only take so much pain at once, and a lot of it was pain from regret, from not spending more time with her that year that I was going wild out in the city. She would call me sometimes and be like, call me on, like, we should hang out. And yeah, so I would numb out from that. But at the celebration of life, she had requested that my uncle learned the song I Speak Jesus by Charity Gale like a week before, and my uncle felt like she wanted him to play that for her when she passed, and he played I Speak Jesus, and it was her declaration over her kids, over her grandkids. And so yeah, that was a seed planted in my heart and in my life. That song I Speak Jesus, it means so much to me, just looking back. But that's whenever everything in my life changed. I stopped going out, and I stopped hanging out with those friend groups who were really, really close to me, and my excuse was just that I was in grief. And I was still under severe oppression spiritually, and I started to self-medicate more at home. I had gotten into some pills, and yeah, I was just like self-medicating and smoking weed and doing Adderall, and also I was doing mushrooms at home, and I started to have a lot of depersonalization and derealization, if you've ever struggled with those two, like during depression, because everything in my life had just changed, and I was isolating a lot in my apartment. I was spending a lot of time alone. I would still kind of go on walks,
but I was spending a lot of time alone, smoking weed, and I started getting symptoms of paranoia. And I also started getting like medical symptoms of what doctors would say is schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, all of these like severe depression disorder, anxiety, like severe paranoia. And I started to hear voices in my head. And whenever I say voices in my head, I do not mean audible voices. However, you know, like whenever you can hear someone's thought, or not hear someone's thought, you can hear a thought in someone's voice. Like, this was not a voice of my mom. This was not a voice of me. This was a dark voice of a man and multiple men. And this is how I know they were demons, because I don't hear those voices anymore. Hallelujah. But I was hearing these voices of these demons, and they would talk really fast, and it was just so dark of time, and I can't believe I experienced that. But I also had just horrific experiences here in my apartment that is so full of life and so full of joy. And I'm truly a believer that it is not places that are haunted, but it is people that are haunted. And you know, I live in this old building, and I would always just blame it on the building, like, oh, there's ghosts in here, that's why I'm being haunted. But no, I had opened up so many spiritual doors, from the drugs, from the sex, from the addictions, from the depression, from the suicidal thoughts. I had opened up all these doors that were eating me from the inside out, that I was having the voices in my head, and I was seeing shadows, and I was seeing these wispy light beings like wisp around my apartment at night, and I was being woken up by terrors in the middle of the night. I would have sleep paralysis. I would, like, the doors would just open on their own. I was being watched, and I was being hunted alive by these spirits, and I believe I encountered so much spiritual oppression during this time. So much. I started really fantasizing about just the darkness. I started being really allured and enamored by blood, by violent kind of like movies and gore. I would watch American Horror Story, and it wouldn't even faze me. I would watch Dexter, was like my favorite TV show. Wouldn't even faze me. The blood. I was attracted to the serial killer vibe. I was attracted to these dark psychological horror movies and TV shows. Yeah, just like American Horror Story kind of like defined my aesthetic during that period of time, because I was under so much demonic influence and oppression. Like, I went to this one kind of like museum, and I like was like taking pictures of like the Ouija board. I was just really like enthralled and enticed by demons, I believe, during this period of time. And I just was really lost. And but I knew the spiritual world existed, because I started having these experiences both under the influence and not under the influence, where I was like, okay, the spiritual world exists. What the heck? This is whenever I started buying books and really like coming across YouTube videos and like tarot card readings on TikTok, because like, come on, the devices listen to what we talk about. They know what we want to see. And I was starting to get more into like yoga and a little bit of like ritual stuff, and just that whole world of horoscopes and stuff was like really attractive to me, because I just wanted to know what the heck is this spiritual world that I'm experiencing. And then I would look up questions like, am I even real? Because of the depersonalization, your brain starts to change under certain drugs, under certain influences. That's how the demons get you to question reality. So I was questioning reality, because they ultimately wanted me to end my life. And so a kind of like blessing in disguise situation happened soon after this. In October of 2022, a few months after my grandma passed and I was under this spiritual oppression, I met my very last relationship that I was in, and that only lasted for 10 months. But this was kind of a blessing in disguise, because this relationship temporarily kind of got me out of that oppression, because I was focused on him, and I wasn't, you know, around any other guys or anything like that. So I was still like in my healing era, but just like trying to be healthy. He worked out and stuff like that, and I wanted to kind of be healthy. He would drink on the weekends, but this was a different type of distraction. So whenever I was hanging out with him, it was a lot more like material things. So we would go on trips and all of that, and you know, we'd dress nice and go to nice dinners and all that stuff. And so we were actually going on dates, and I had never experienced that before with a man. However, it was lacking emotional intimacy. We had no emotional intimacy, and you know, I started to kind of like fall for him because we were spending a lot more time together, and I thought he was gonna be my husband. Like, I literally was like dreaming about that, you know, writing our first and last name together, which is just so funny how girls dream, you know, just looking back on that, because it was such a blessing in disguise, because whenever that relationship didn't end up working out after like 10 months of fun and going on these trips and like thinking we were gonna work out, like I ended up meeting his parents finally, but from like convincing him to like meet his parents. But he always kept me like at an emotional distance, and so I would ask him about them, like, when will we like say I love you and stuff like that, and he would just like avoid it and stuff like that. So I knew it wasn't working out. I was also taking antidepressants at the time, so that really like was just a mess, because I would be drinking alcohol with him on the weekends, taking the antidepressants, and then just like getting violently ill and sick. And so yeah, long story short, I was kind of like hanging out with my parents more, and they were kind of, you know, talking to me. And I've always had a relationship with my dad that was really, really spiritual. And he, you know, he gave me advice one day. He was like, Ellie, you deserve something different. Like, you should end things with him. And so I ended up FaceTiming him and breaking up with him. This was the start of something new. So awesome, because this goes into my testimony of how I find Jesus. It's all getting better now. So post breakup, I was a mess. I was crying a lot, but I was also healing at the same time. So I would go to the gym, I would walk on the treadmill for like an hour, I would work out. I was really just distracting myself. And you know, I was so heartbroken, and like my heart was so tender, because when you're breaking up with someone, you want them to be like, no, I want you back, you know, all this stuff. But and I knew it was for the best, but we went our separate ways. And you know, I was trying to heal and all this stuff, and 1 week goes by and I'm with my friend who I love. You know, we went for coffee, and it was downtown Austin. And I remember we were just walking downtown Austin on Willie Nelson Boulevard, and I hear worship music out of the corner of my ear. For those of you who don't know, worship music means a lot to me. I've always been connected to music. That's how I feel like God has always spoken to me. I listened to it whenever I was very, very young. And the Holy Spirit was speaking to me in that time on that street in Austin when I was hearing the worship music. And so I followed the worship music, and we were just sitting there, and they were playing on the street, and I was like swaying back and forth, and I told her, I said, I think I want to start going to church. I had just been feeling that. I had heard it a few times, kind of like in my soul, and what I thought was my intuition back at the time. But I had felt it, and so I decided to take a picture of the sign, and I accidentally ended up signing up for a different church. But I went there to their like home group, like a home Bible study for the first time. I was completely alone. And this was in October of 2023. And I went high. I had still had my weed pen, and I kind of like kept it as a crutch or whatever. Like it was my vice for a long time, even after being a Christian. The first time I ever went, I was crying so much during the worship, and I just like stood up and I was like, I want to sing worship songs. I just felt that. And someone next to me was like, oh, you should connect with the worship leader. And like, she said his name, and then I stood up and I was like, said his name. Like, where are you? He comes up to me, and you know, we exchanged information, and we ended up going out for pizza a few weeks later, and just to connect, because I was, looking at maybe going to that church, and that's what you're supposed to do. You connect with the new members. And we had a conversation at that pizza shop that really changed my life. I was able to open up about everything that I had experienced in the last 3 years, and I'm just bawling my eyes out. And I think just saying it out loud like helped me realize that like I finally for the first time saw the mercy and the grace of Jesus. And I had heard the gospel there at church, and it really, like, I knew that Jesus was real. I knew that Jesus was real and that he was orchestrating my story the whole time. I started being reminded of the love that I felt when I was really younger during that time, that conversation, and he prayed over me, and I could just look up and I could see in my mind, in my imagination, everything that I had done being undone, being unwoven, just miraculously being washed over. I could almost feel like the blood of Jesus rinsing and washing myself over, and for the first time I felt the grace of God. And the grace of God touched me that day in the pizza shop. He gave me a song called Greater Still to go listen to, and I listened to that song a couple hundred times that week, bawling my eyes out in my car, absolutely just in awe that God had come in and revealed himself to me. And when you encounter the love of God like that, when you encounter him in your car or on your bathroom floor, or when you're at your lowest point and you see all the stuff that you've done, but you feel him loving you so much, like, it breaks you and it molds you at the same time. It breaks your heart, but it also is like such a love of God, and he hugged me so many times that week and that month. And ever since that day and that week, and whenever I started going to church, it was so emotional, because I was just really comforted by the Spirit of God. My walk after that has not been perfect. Oh my gosh, it has been crazy, because I went back to certain things a couple times, and one of those times was a few months after starting going to church, and it was at the end of December 30th, 2023. I just realized about Jesus. I had not started reading my Bible often. I had a Bible, but I would just, scroll through it a few times, look up some Bible verses, nothing major, but I was going to church, and I knew the truth. I knew the truth about Jesus. And I decided to go to the gas station and buy some legal mushroom gummies. That night I had a near-death experience where I thought I was going to die because I had a bad trip. And it was like God allowed me to see the evil that was behind that drug and all drugs that night. He revealed to me the truth behind the deception of the enemy and how he uses drugs to alter our reality, to make us believe that we are no longer in control of our bodies, which is a complete lie. And I was visited by multiple entities that were convincing me that night to take my own life. And the only reason why I am alive today is because I pleaded with Jesus. I pleaded with God the Father. I was on my knees for hours begging him to save my life. Begging him to save my life. I went back and forth. I was like, Jesus, if you just let me live one more day, I will spend the rest of eternity for you, because you have revealed to me the darkness, and I will never, ever, ever shut up about what I'm experiencing, what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing. I was demonically attacked that night, and the enemy wanted me to end my life that night. And I even wrote a note to my mom during that, and I have the notebook here with me, and I'm writing a detailed story about what happened to me that night, because there's so much that I just want to expose about the world of witchcraft and new age and drugs, and it's all interconnected, and all these doors that I opened up to the demonic, and I want to expose it. I want to tell people to literally flee from that darkness, because I was revealed the truth of it. So for so long, the enemy disguised himself as an angel of light in my life. He was enticing, he was attractive, he was giving me everything that I ever thought that I wanted. But then once I knew the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus Christ, and I went back to it one more time, that's when God allowed the veil was thin. He allowed the scales to be lifted from my eyes, and I actually saw the demons that were behind all of these things. And I'm writing about it because this story was pivotal. I have not been the same after December 30th, 2023. That day was pivotal for me. God came in and saved my life. I felt the love of the Father like no other amount I had ever experienced whenever he saved my life. And part of it was, I wrote this this note to my mom when I was about to take my own life. And I didn't want to, because I still wanted to be alive so bad. And this is how I know it was demonic. I mean, apart from what I saw and what I heard, I said, Mama, I love you so much, with all these exclamation points and these hearts. She's the first person who I thought of, because I didn't want to go, and I didn't want her to think that this is my fault. And I was going to write that it's not, what I want to do, that these were demons telling me to do this. And I ended up, by the grace of God, being able to, after pleading with him to come in and intervene, I was able to call her and tell her what was happening. And I felt like a danger to myself and others. And that was a very, very, very pivotal time in my life. And after that day, wow, I knew something changed. And it's been a spiritual growth walk ever since then. And I can get into some things miracles that have happened kind of like post all of this. But God is just so insane and amazing. And I will speak about him, like I said, till the day I die, because it's my purpose. Like he marked me so intensely. I had this experience where I saw and I felt God, and I also saw and I felt demons and the devil. And I know that we live in a spiritual world. It's completely apparent to me from what I've experienced, and I want people to know that they're not alone. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what season of life you're in right now. It doesn't matter what you think about yourself. You are worth living a life that reflects the true value of who you are. I've seen visions of God holding my hand, and I'm just like this little girl, and he's holding my hand walking up this mountain, and he looks back at me and he's like, come on, and I'll stumble and I trip. And ever since like getting to know God and how he's purified me, he put me through the fire to purify me. God has humbled me so much. He has taken me, and I said, God, like, you got to make me a lot less of me and make you so much more big and glorified in my life, because I have battled with the battle between humility, with self-righteousness, being religious spirit. I have battled with these things, and I've put it all at the altar. I've put my desire to be in a marriage and a relationship at the altar. I've put all my dreams, my social media following that I built on TikTok, my career, everything that I want to do, acting, singing, all of these things I've just given to him. I said, purify them, God. I don't want it. I don't want it if it's not your plan for me, God. I don't want anything. I don't want anything other than Jesus. He is the only answer. He's the only solution to anything. For the rest of my days, I just want to honor him. I want to do whatever he wants. Whatever it may be, big or small, or just today, whatever he wants from me today, which is another reason why I'm making this video. I was wanting to make it all nice and smooth in one take and all this, and yes, there are more details to the story. And yes, I want to share more about what God has taught me after the fact, and dealing with certain sins that have tried to creep back in and tell me that I need to go back to them. But I'm telling you, there is power in the Word of God. I would not be purified without this book. Meditating on the scripture is the only way, and being with Jesus, getting out of the way so that he can come in and he can be the one to change your spirit. It's nothing but the blood of Jesus, the blood of the Lion and the Lamb. He's so perfect. He's so perfect, and he deserves all of our honor and our praise forever. He's amazing. And life with Jesus is easy. Not in an easy way where things are just going to be smooth all the time, but your suffering has purpose. It has a place. He has a plan for you. And sometimes going through the trials, realizing that you need dependence on him, and that this life is not about us. This life isn't about getting what we want, what we think we want. This life is about dying to ourselves like Jesus did. He walked so far with that heavy cross beating down on his back after being almost bludgeoned and beaten to death. He did that for you. He did it for me. He did it when he didn't have to. He was king already. He was God in human flesh. He didn't have to, but he knew that that's the only thing. That's the only thing that could return us to the place where we could live with God forever, for eternity. We have a real enemy, and the battle has already been won. Are we going to believe it? Are we going to put our faith in Jesus alone? He is the way, the truth, and the life. He saved me. He saved my life, and I owe him everything. I owe him everything. I am heartbroken for Jesus because I know how much he loves me. And I get to talk to him now about that. And I get to share about Jesus with other people, even though it's scary and it puts you in a box. And it makes you feel like a freak sometimes here in this world, because we have minimized God so much to just a Sunday, or to just an aesthetic, or to just, being a Christian. Like, that's not what he is. He is the magnificent, majestic, powerful, matchless King of Kings. He's the beginning and the end. He is worth surrendering to. He's worth knowing personally. He will change your life forever. Would you just let him in? If you've never heard the gospel, this is the gospel. In the beginning, we were created in God's perfect, beautiful image. He knew you before you were born. He created you. He knit you in your mother's womb. But in the beginning, we were also given a choice whether we would follow God or not. And there was a tempter. There was someone who came and tempted Adam. And whenever Adam chose his free will, instead of obeying the word of God, which is God wanting to keep him safe and whole, we inherited that sin from the enemy and from that temptation from Adam. Through one man, Adam, sin entered the world. And the beautiful part about this story is that God knew that he wanted to go back to the original design, where we got to live with God, where we got to be with him and commune with him as he intended us to be. He made us in his image to be with him and to be among him. We chose our own way for a long time, and we always followed our flesh rather than the faith in the one true King. And over many centuries and years and all this time of people choosing their own way, and we continue to choose our own way, God had a plan, and he sent his son Jesus, who's God in the form of man, who's his son. And it's beautiful. When you get to know the Trinity, you'll understand this. But he sent him here, and he was born in a manger, born in a little town in Bethlehem. People would say, like, what good comes from Bethlehem? Nothing good comes from Bethlehem. He was born in a very humble manger. And Jesus walked a perfect, sinless life. He walked a perfect, sinless life, and he performed miracles during his ministry when he was 30 years old for 3 years. And he would heal the sick, and he would teach people about humility. He would teach people that it's about the heart of God and about pursuing his heart and not about what you do. And he was so selfless, and he would sit at the table with sinners, and he would sit at the table. He wouldn't judge them, and he wouldn't be like, what you're doing is evil, like you're evil. He would point out and he would expose, and he just had such a beautiful heart, and he only wanted unity and peace. And he was so perfect, but a perfect God is still crucified in an imperfect world. And the people crucified him on the cross, And his very last words were, "It is finished." The blood that was shed from him is the atonement that was required to defeat sin once and for all. Putting faith in Jesus, that he died, and 3 days later, he resurrected. There are over 500 eyewitness testimonies, women being the first ones who saw him. Back in the day, you wouldn't write that women were the first ones to see Jesus alive, fully in his body again, glowing, and he was alive. He wasn't in the tomb. The tomb was empty. If you put your faith that it is through Jesus dying and resurrecting 3 days later that sin has been defeated, you can have eternal life in Jesus. So I want to guide you through this prayer. Jesus, I don't know who you are right now, but I know I feel this tugging on my heart. God, I just want to surrender my life to you right now. God, I invite you to come in and to take hold of my heart. God, do whatever you want to do in my life. God, I give you the reins. I surrender and I give my life to you. I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And I put faith in King Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for listening to my testimony. I pray that you have a very blessed day and that you continue to seek Jesus with everything that you have. It's not an accident that you stumbled upon this video, and I just speak Jesus. I speak Jesus over your life. More videos coming soon. I love you guys. Bye-bye.